I'm April Little.
And I'm Anna Dowahair.
And this is the Reclaiming the Garden podcast. We wanted to start off today with a content warning because we are talking about the new Netflix documentary, Pray Away. So obviously if conversion therapy is something that triggers you, or also talking about any of the impacts of conversion therapy, suicidal ideation, self-harm, please take care of yourself. You can catch us in the next episode, which will be decidedly a lot lighter than some of the topics we've been doing lately. We're going to talk about women in the Bible. Next topic episode. We'll have an interview later this month. But yeah, so please take care of yourself. And
if you are choosing to watch Pray Away, first of all, it was really eye-opening. Definitely watch it if you feel you're comfortable enough to do so. But if you choose to watch it, I know that the Pray Away website, QCF, and other queer Christian organizations have had, or they've created discussion questions as well as methods of self-care. And
on the Pray Away film page's Instagram, they also have a sort of self-care guide thing, which is nice.
Absolutely. So if you choose to watch the film, again, it's absolutely incredible. If you're able to watch it and if you feel comfortable enough watching it, take care of yourself while watching it as well. And fortunately, the filmmakers have put out an excellent list of resources as well as self-care tips while watching the movie.
Yeah, so I guess let's get into it. This is sort of, as this episode is going to be sort of, I guess, more off-the-cuff kind of discussion than some of our other episodes have been. I guess the first thing that sort of stuck out to me is that the first story in the documentary that they choose to share is someone who is still in the ex-gay sort of narrative. Specifically, I believe he's the founder of Freedom March, which is, I think, let me look up the website to actually see how they describe themselves.
On their Facebook, the About section says, speakers, worship, and a march celebrating freedom from homosexual/transgender lifestyles by the grace and power of Jesus Christ.
Yikes.
That just hurt my soul to read out loud just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, they kind of try to say it's not conversion therapy, but the thing is, the definition of conversion therapy that the documentary starts out with, includes the phrase that if this attempt to change sexuality is happening in the context of peer support groups, that is still conversion therapy. And so that means that yes, Freedom March is that, and then also the Change movement, which is, even if it's not officially connected, it's kind of affiliated, maybe unofficially, with Bethel Church. Another sort of group of people that are saying that they're just, there are these groups of people that are just want to support each other, who have left the LGBTQ lifestyle. It's not a fucking...
And definitely Bethel has been, while it's not their official, they won't give an official stance, there are a lot of pastors that do preach anti-queer rhetoric.
With movements like this, the Freedom March and then the Change movement, they both in the documentary and in their marketing, they do seem so happy, and it's weird to watch, because you don't know what's going on inside their heads. You don't know whether they're actually severely struggling, the other people in the documentary say that they were, when they were sort of having the same sort of being the spokespeople of this movement. They were lying. They said that they were struggling inside. And so it's just, it's also interesting to see that, I wonder how he feels about being in a documentary that is combating the narrative that he's trying to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you were saying earlier, he is very much promoting the documentary on all of his social media, being like, hey, watch this, and kind of putting snarky Bible verse references under some of the photos.
So... on Jeffrey McCall's Instagram, he's posted some articles, both in New York Times and USA Today, about the documentary. And so for one of them, I'm going to go ahead and assume the New York Times article did not treat him well, because the Bible verse that he put was, an evil and adulterous generation asked for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. Then he left them and went away. So that, right? That feels like he's saying, well,
I feel gotta love evangelical passive aggression, right? It's just say what you're gonna say.
There's another article that he posted about, which might be more positive, because he has hearts next to it, and then Revelation 12:11, but they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they did not cling to life even in the face of death. I guess, right, that sort of connects back to, like, part of the narrative is, like, it's this warrior narrative, right? That's actually an interesting thing that's different from, like, Exodus International, maybe. Like, this new movement is like, oh, we're warriors for Christ by, like, leaving our homosexuality behind. And
yeah, and I know that Warriors for Christ was such a big thing in evangelical circles, especially especially during the Bush presidency and going into the Obama presidency, of, like, we're about to engage in spiritual warfare and we need to fight the devil and his temptations. And it's interesting that kind of pervades into the Freedom March narrative of, like, this is a culture war that we need to fight.
Mm-hmm. I definitely was very much, I guess let's talk about, is it good or bad that this man's story is represented in this documentary? I have very conflicting feelings about it. First of all, before we go into anything, don't troll this person, don't go on their page and say bad things. You know, if you feel the need to comment that God loves LGBTQ people just as they are, don't attack him personally, you know? Just spread the good news that God loves all people.
Yeah, because even if Jeffrey McCall doesn't believe in it, hopefully someone who is looking into his ministry will see that and maybe do some research outside of the conversion narrative.
One final thing also before we get into more of, like, the documentary, he posted to his Instagram a Dolly Parton quote, and it's like, do you realize that she is very much an LGBTQ ally? Like,
she's an icon. Yeah. She's like an honorary member of the LGBTQ community, honestly.
Yeah.
With the amount of stuff she has done for the community. Also, I love that one of the comments under it is so proud that she supports the LGBTQ community.
Hell yeah! She's on
it's like,
our
do you
side,
not know
boy.
who Dolly is?
Yeah.
I know. But yeah, I agree. Like, it was very interesting to include him in the documentary. I see how it would be kind of I see how it's important to have both sides of it. Like, this is someone who truly believes that conversion therapy is working for them and that you can change your sexual attraction.
Maybe it was to avoid accusations of being too biased. Like, maybe this is, like, a way to get Christians who are, like, on that side to watch it. So I think that's an interesting idea that, like, oh, well, maybe this will draw them in and then they'll actually see what bullshit it is. Like, you know? Like,
yeah, I also think it's interesting that they put him first in the documentary.
Yeah, I was not expecting
really go through. Yeah, and the weird thing is I feel like a lot of times in documentaries, and this isn't a, like, knock on the filmmakers or anything like that. I've just noticed in documentaries when you usually start with someone's story, but even in a documentary setting, there is kind of a bit of a hero's journey where they might not be exactly the same as they were when they were first portrayed. And I think it's very interesting that they start with someone at the beginning who is exactly the same, if not more zealous in his views.
Yeah.
And now he has
an
bigger platform.
Thing. So on Instagram, a bunch of people were asking, do you think this portrays you in a positive light? And he says, I think that it shows what I clearly believe. So he thinks that his views are represented in it, like what he says. So
I mean, again, I'll give credit where credit's due. They do not, I think in a way, the fact that it was very, like, I feel like the filmmakers and whoever were kind of watching it as an outside looking in with him, where they're like, no, let's see what he believes without influencing, without causing a stir or anything, see, like, how he is in his environment with his people. And I think that was, and so I guess to that, I guess his views were very well represented. How people respond to it is a completely different story, but I think his views were accurately represented because there was no interference in expressing those views.
Yeah, I definitely just got really mad, and, like, I really saw how, like, this teaching can be the teaching that he says can be so damaging when, like, you know, where was it? It was, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. There was this part where, like, this mom called him about her son, quote unquote, as in her daughter who just came out as trans, and the whole time the mom is misgendering this daughter, and it's just, and, like, she, you know, the mom is afraid of, like, what, and you know, the mom, when the daughter came out, the mom insisted, no, you're a boy, and now she said that this daughter has been gone for like several months. And it makes sense to be worried, you know, and part of me like understands the fear of the unknown, but like then of course the person that she's calling Jeffrey is just like reinforcing what she already believes. And the thing, oh my god, I got really mad when Jeffrey's like, he knows that you love him. It's like, no, I don't think this daughter knows that like she is loved by you, because she must feel rejected by you. And you know, she might keep her faith if you were to accept her, but damn, you just fucked everything up. Like,
yeah, and like one thing that Jeffrey kind of goes into is like he kind of talks about how like, oh, he was like drunk and he was on drugs and he was trans, and like as if they all correlate with each other. And the thing is, people, and the thing is that is awful is that people who are in the LGBTQ community are more likely to abuse certain substances, and that's not because it is a like
it's not a part of the package of being gay.
It's not part of the package. It's because people are so violently disowned by their families and by their communities,
and then these communities that are
to numb the pain.
They get into these communities that sometimes the only communities that accept them maybe are using drugs and maybe are partying, but like it gives them a sense of safety and belonging that they aren't getting at their home. I think that really...
Yeah, and like, you know how you can avoid that is by, I don't know,
giving them a loving fucking
kids.
home,
like loving them unconditionally is basically in the unspoken contract of being a parent.
Mm-hmm. And like, also, I should point out, of course, that like not every, you know, community that people flock to is gonna be like that. You know, not every community fits that, like, all these narratives that are always like involving I'm gay because of sexual abuse, I'm gay because of drug abuse. Like that doesn't fit the majority of people's stories, I would say. Like,
yeah, and it's unfortunate when that is the case, and that's like, I have so much compassion for people who have gone through such trauma on their journey to finding themselves, but it's not the reason. Like correlation doesn't necessarily equate causation.
Yeah, so I guess like another sort of question I had in my mind, like what do we make of Jeffrey like feeling the Spirit calling him to share his story, and that like the love of Jesus compelled him to not be gay or trans anymore? Because like when I think when I was like a lot earlier in my journey of coming to terms with sexuality, like stories like that would make me so scared, like because I was like, oh, how can the Spirit be telling us two completely different things? So
yeah, absolutely. And it's also kind of that similar notion of the same Bible used to abolish slavery is the same Bible that people use to justify slavery. It's you're going to hear what you want to hear, and you're going to do with that information what you will. And it's unfortunate that I think whatever spirit that we hear is a reflection of what we have learned here on earth. Like if we didn't learn affirming theology, or if we didn't learn that being gay is okay and you're still divine and still loved by God, like that spirit that you hear is going to be a lot different.
Yeah, I guess it's just interesting to think. As far as I know, I think he mentioned that like he like became a Christian and then this happened. It's not like he grew up, I don't know, or at least from what the way that it's framed, it doesn't really seem like he grew up religious. But like or maybe in any case, there was some part of his youth where he was, you know, he was living as a woman and you know, doing like I guess it's interesting that I think he says like homosexual acts to refer to actually having sex with men as a trans woman, which is interesting. I guess that's the way that evangelicals would understand gender and sexuality.
Yeah, it's just so, because again, it's also that thing of like a lot of evangelicals aren't going to affirm a trans person as their gender. You know, they'll still be like best case scenario, they'll say like a trans woman is a trans woman. They're not like a real woman. They're a trans woman, but they're still a woman. That's like best case scenario, and that's just invalidating a trans person's identity just with like extra steps. Whereas, and so part of me wonders if maybe Jeffrey was like, oh yes, I'm a trans woman, but I'm not really a woman, so I was having like homosexual sex,
Yeah, I mean, it connects back into, I think, what...
Because maybe it's hard because you can't... Yeah, and it's hard because I think a lot of times, and granted, I would personally want to do more research on his journey, I guess, just to know where he's coming from, honestly.
He did write a memoir, so maybe that's something we can look into.
That's something I'd probably borrow from, like, a library. I'm not about to give him my money.
Right. No, yeah.
If you have to read it, friends, if you want to read controversial books, go to your local library. They need the support. And don't give a dime to the author. Or if they don't have it at your library, buy it secondhand. And support a secondhand bookstore. I just don't know how he came to the conclusions he came to. Because I also feel like a lot of the time, too, when you ask someone with that mindset of like, hey, like, why do you think that you're called to do this, or why do you think you're called to do that? The Bible is quoted. And it's always like, because Jesus, blah, 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 like, Jesus died for my sins, and my sin was being this. And it's like, okay, but like, if that wasn't in the picture, like, what would your opinion be?
And they wouldn't be able to answer
that. It's interesting to me.
I mean,
exactly.
Well, you know, interesting thing about, like, how, I guess, interesting thing speaking to, like, how he possibly got into something like this. I mean, obviously, like, in this day and age, this wouldn't be the exact reason, but I just think about Yvette Schneider's story. She's the ex-director of Women's Ministries of Exodus International, and, you know, part of how she got into the church is because, like, several, like, 16 of her friends died of AIDS during the epidemic in the 1990s. And she sort of wanted something more ordered in all the chaos that she was experiencing, and church offered that structure. It felt like a relief to her.
Which is so heartbreaking. I can't imagine that sort of pain, and I understand that maybe she did want that sort of structure, but it's sad that she went literally all the way to the other side of the narrative.
Oh, I guess another thing to bring up, everyone who speaks in this documentary is white. And
yes,
Alicia Crosby already sort of knew this just from the trailer. Honestly, she was like, the trailer makes clear on Twitter. Sorry, Alicia Crosby said the trailer makes clear that the film tells a white-dominated narrative, and that's tiring. You know, she mentioned that BIPOC people do endure the violence of conversion therapy too, but it looks different in their communities and is called by different names. You know, and so there's definitely need and space. She said in her tweet, there's definitely need and space for the creators, a prior way to explain why a greater diversity of stories was not told. I mean, I guess part of the reason is because this is a focus on leadership, and, you know, leadership in organizations, specifically leadership in evangelical organizations, tend to skew pretty fucking white. So
very Caucasian.
Yeah. So I think that.
But I agree. I would have loved to have heard. Like, now that Alicia brings it up, I would have loved to have heard different perspectives and different stories, because granted, I never went through conversion therapy or anything like that, but I would love to see a whole bunch. I would have loved to have seen different perspectives on that. I think that would have been really neat to see.
Yeah. I guess one interesting thing, I know Yvette, so Yvette's whole name is Yvette Cantu Schneider, so she does have a Hispanic last name, which, okay, let's just talk about this. Like, the Family Research Council, when they met with her, they were like, oh, great, you have the, like, Hispanic last name, you're young, we're taking advantage of that. Like,
yeah, it's so... it's like... And it's so funny, because I don't know what her background is, but she is a very, very white-passing woman, and it's funny to be like, oh, like, this last name sounds slightly ethnic. This will be good to bring more people in. And it's like, no, what? It's like we are probably the same levels of Caucasian looking. Again, I don't know what her background is, but in terms of being, like, very white passing, it's just like, yeah, the leadership is just very Caucasian, or very Caucasian passing. And that's so interesting. Like, that honestly kind of made me giggle a little bit in the midst of this, like, really
yeah, I mean, and also, you know, it's like,
matter.
They, you know, they were like, oh, you're a woman, you've got the Hispanic last name, and you don't look gay. Because, of course, like, even though they're trying to, like, have some sort of gay representation in their organization, like, it has to be someone who's ex-gay, it has to be someone who looks super feminine, like, they can't have any speck of queerness, like, in their organization at all.
Yeah, absolutely. That being said, I feel like a lot of the things she was wearing while speaking at these, like, anti-gay events were very, like...
Gay power move.
Were very gay power move, like, early seasons of L-word fashion.
Yeah.
Like, I was getting some, like, for people that haven't watched the L-word, I was getting very, like, the character of Bet vibes from her.
Absolutely.
As well as some, like, Don Denbo, but not her lover Cindy vibes from that. Again, for people that have watched the L Word, you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it was very, like, queer woman power move. Button-ups, vests, and that there's nothing wrong with that. Like, heterosexual women can dress however they want as well, and cis women can dress however they want as well. I just thought that was... She wasn't exactly the pinnacle of Christian femininity that they were looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least in my opinion.
One thing I think is interesting about Yvette's story is that she did realize that she was bisexual, you know? And I think, like, for probably, like, some, not all, of course, but some people that are in these sort of ex-gay movements, it's quite possible that some of them are bisexual, and so they, you know, they are what they are perceiving as possibly, like, being changed to being straight is just realizing that they like both genders, like, you know? So
yeah, and it's so interesting because, like, that's completely glossed over by a lot of these organizations. It's either you're gay or you're straight. There is nothing in between. At best, it's completely ignored. At worst, you're considered, like, a promiscuous, dirty person that can't make up their mind. And it's sad because we still see that bi erasure and that pan erasure today, even in the queer community. But yeah, it's just very interesting that it's very much like a lot of things in evangelicalism. It's very binary.
Yes.
It's either you're straight or you're not. You're not in the middle. It's one or the other.
Yeah. So part of me thinks that, like, you know, whatever possible, like, successful stories they might have where people really do seem to be healthy, which, you know, I would say are probably a majority of stories that come out of movements like this, but, like, you know, people who are, it's very possible that they might be bi or pan. So
yeah, and one thing that I was reading specifically about Exodus International is that from a sample of 73 participants, 98 before dropouts, because people did end up dropping out, that 15% had successfully converted to heterosexuality, 23% reported homosexual attraction to be present only incidentally, and 29% had modest decreases in homosexual attraction. No significant change was reported by 27% of participants, 12% reported giving up on conversion therapy, and 8% subsequently identified as homosexual. So that is just from 73 participants, and this was a study done by Professor Stanton L. Jones and Mark Yarhouse, and this was from an evangelical Christian college, Wheaton College. So again, do with that information what you will, but it's not even like, oh, everyone was cured. It's not as effective as people thought it was. Because if anything, it's like, oh, I just don't have gay thoughts anymore. I'm not having as many.
Right. The interesting thing in John Polk's story, he's the former board president of Exodus, and, you know, he was in a mixed orientation marriage with someone who identifies as an ex-lesbian, and he was the figurehead for the movement. And I think the way that he thought the conversion therapy is working is because he was like, oh, well, I don't have these behaviors anymore. You know, even if I still have the hots, it's like I don't have the behaviors, and so therefore I am changed. And then, you know, he slowly started realizing, like, no, he was still very much gay, and, you know, it started to really the teaching and the way he was living was destroying his life, and I'm very thankful that he was able to get out of that. So
yeah, and I'm looking at other organizations as well. There is Joel 225 International, there's Courage International, there's Love One Out.
Living Hope is still a thing. The ministry that Julie Rodgers was a part of, which, let's just go ahead. Julie Rodgers, let's talk about Julie Rodgers. Fucking love Julie Rodgers.
She was such a sweetie. Oh my gosh, first of all, I'm First of all, she's married now, so Julie Rodgers.
Showing the marriage is such a beautiful way to end that, like,
it was
documentary.
so beautiful. Yeah, and if you're listening, Miss Julie Rodgers, congratulations on your wedding. I can't wait to read your book.
Yes, out loud.
We'll also tag and promote that on our social media as well if you're interested in learning more about her. But damn, her story was...
You know, when I was first researching affirming theology for the first time, I think I must have been typing into, like, actually no. Okay, so I had typed into Google, like, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? Found Reformation Project.
Ooh, like, that's fortunate.
Yeah. Well, no, I guess maybe, yeah, I think I found, like, first at the time the Gay Christian Network, and then through that I think I saw Reformation Project, and so on YouTube, I think I was looking at their YouTube page, and, like, the latest keynote speech had been Julie Rodgers. That was, like, their most recent video on their channel, and so I clicked on it, and I watched it, and she shared a lot of, like, the story that she did share in the documentary as well. She also included, I guess, one part of her story that isn't really shown in the documentary is that after leaving the ex-gay movement, she was actually in the celibate gay movement for a little while, which is sort of known as, like, side B or spiritual friendship.
Yeah.
And yeah, she talks about her experience with that, but ultimately thinking, like, she could not, you know, choose to deny herself companionship and to live, you know, the fullness of God, all God wants her to be, and, you know, she couldn't deny loving the people that Jesus loved. So I remember thinking it was really powerful when I first watched that. I mean, it didn't quite push me to become affirming, but it definitely was, like, on the path to doing that. So
yeah, at the very least, it was that notion of, oh, like, I'm not alone in any of this. There is someone else out there. Like, queer Christianity is very possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. I'm
also on Living Hope's website.
Yes,
and
me
I'm
too.
Just like, this is disgusting. Also, they, you know what's really nifty is they have a list of churches that they're partnered with. So, friends, if you want to go there and not go to those churches, that's an idea for you.
Great.
There's one in California. It's called All People's Church San Diego. I don't live in San Diego. I'm about 2 hours away, but now I know to never go there. Mm-hmm. And granted, they do seem to, as they are a Texas-based organization, a lot of the churches that they're partnered with are based out of Texas.
And might I remind you,
Texas, go to their website, do your research. You know what churches to avoid because they are partnered with a conversion therapy organization.
Yeah, might I remind people that just, like, this ministry is being run by the same guy that, you know, was running it when Julie Rodgers was a part of it, and because of what they were teaching her, she fucking burned her skin. Like, that was something so surprising when I was watching it.
Yeah, and, like, that's a part in the documentary, I guess that'll be a slight content warning, too, is she does talk about the self-harm.
Yeah, she takes...
that she inflicted, yeah.
I just cannot believe... She takes a nickel, like, puts it up to her lighter, puts it on her skin until it pops, and I just, like, if you need any, like, example of bad fruit, there it is. Like, I just, like, and that's, and it's just, some people would say that, like, oh, it's because of, like, her living a broken lifestyle, but no, she was, like, very much still trying to be, like, good and still trying to deny everything. She was doing everything right according to this ministry, and she was miserable. I mean, for me, thankfully, I guess, like, I didn't physically harm myself in high school when I was, well, actually, I mean, in middle school and early high school a little bit I did, but not actually for sexuality reasons, just because I was depressed. But, you know, I mean, it did start to affect my body and mind in the sense that, like, I was just so completely disconnected from my body, and, you know, I like, pushed my emotions away. I learned to, like, turn off my emotions, which is not something that your brain is supposed to do. Gotta be real clear. Don't, like, try to just turn your emotions off. Bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I kind of went through it similarly, but it was, like, because of untreated anxiety and untreated depression. And granted, there was a lot of anxiety around coming out, but... Again, it was more for other mental health reasons.
Yeah, I mean, with all the people's stories, there's an example of, like, this teaching literally affecting, like, their body and mind in such, like, in such intense ways, like the panic attacks that Yvette experienced. And it's just like, I really do hope that somehow maybe, because Jeffrey's story is featured in it, like these evangelical Christians might watch it and see like, no, but this teaching, even though you see those people being so happy, like it can also just as equally cause people to harm themselves. So
yeah, and it's, again, I appreciate that we are kind of able to come to our conclusion with that. It's like, yes, they show someone who's very much in the throes of conversion therapy and leading freedom marches, freedom from my sexuality.
I want to be very clear, you know,
we shows the harm.
We don't know what's going on, like, inside those people's heads. Just as I was watching that, like, whole worship gathering in the house, like, everyone might seem happy, but, like, I just gotta bet that, like, some of them aren't. Like, that some of them are thinking that, like, they can't do this, or thinking, like, oh, I'm not actually changing, something's wrong with me. Like, that was a common thing in the documentary of, like, you know, some people were like, oh, why can't I be like this person? I mean, actually, yeah, John talks about how he was, you know, lying when he was telling his story, and then, you know, that caused people in the audience to be like, why can't I be like him? Something's wrong with me, I'm broken. So yeah. So I just think, when someone like Jeffrey shares their story, there are probably people thinking, why can't I be like him? Yeah,
and definitely, and to add on to that, definitely take that with a huge grain of salt. Like, you don't know what people are going through in their mind. You don't know where they're at. People might be there because their families told them, go to this thing, or they might be there because they truly believe that they can be changed. And it's I think more of the sad thing is, like, it's sad that they found that group first, and not an affirming organization.
Right.
And I think that's why we stay vocal. That's why we promote progressive Christian and queer Christian content, is because we want the people that need that help to find that content before they find the ex-gay stuff. Because obviously it's again looking at the fruit it bears. One is so much more harmful than the other.
Yeah. I definitely think it's really good, though, that, like, this documentary represents at least two people who, you know, two survivors of conversion therapy that are still Christian. You know, obviously Julie very much is unabashedly Christian in her story. I mean, like, she gets married in the National Cathedral. Fun fact. Oh, yes, just fun story as long as we're talking about Julie Rodgers and National Cathedral.
Yes.
So I was doing a internship in January of 2019, and, you know, I knew that Julie Rodgers attended National Cathedral. She might still, please don't be stalkery about it if you, like, you know, go and attend ever, but, you know, I knew she attended, so, you know, I was like, well, I'm in DC, let's go to the National Cathedral and see if she happens to be there. And she was. I remember talking to my sister. She was like, oh, isn't that the person you want to see? And I kind of just, without even saying anything to my sister, I just walked over to Julie Rodgers. And, you know, I was, like, really, really fangirly, probably a little too much. If you're listening to this, Julie, I'm sorry if I came off as a creep. I'm just a really enthusiastic person. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you are.
And, you know, I was able to talk to her about how, like, she was a huge figure on, like, my path to affirmation and coming to terms with my queer identity, which is such a cool thing to be able to, like, say to her. And she was with her wife, Amanda. They're so adorable together. I did watch they have a full recording, well, not full recording, but they have, like, a full sort of presentation video of their wedding that's, like, more than what's in the documentary. So if you want to watch that actually includes more about, I think, maybe even, let's see, it's on YouTube somewhere, maybe on, you know, her Twitter, something, but it's adorable. I love them. They told me a story about, like, the Pride Parade, when they were marching. So Julie and Amanda shared this really cute story of how people started singing This Little Light of Mine when they were in the parade. Like, they were, like, you know, people in the crowd saw, like, this Episcopal church passing by, and so people, like, started singing This Little Light of Mine, which is so cute, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so back to more of the actual documentary. I guess we were. We were sort of.
We were fangirling over Julie Rodgers.
Yeah, so I just mentioned, that they got, married in the National Cathedral. And then there's Randy Thomas, who, they show a scene near the end where he's in a, I guess, more liturgical church. They're saying, like, the Lord's Prayer. And I guess something that's interesting is that, as he's reflecting upon his experiences and everything, I guess I was really conflicted about what he said, that, like, what he did doesn't really deserve to be forgiven. Because, like, I mean, what he did was, like, wrong. But also, I do think that, like, the way that I see it, like, queer people, just by virtue of being queer, are automatically always manipulated into, like, these roles, I mean, like, although he has responsibility, I think that just the system ex-gay ministry also holds responsibility.
Absolutely. It's such a weird line to cross, because yes, there is that personal responsibility, mm-hmm. but it's also that thing of, like, you're taught non-affirming theology, and you're taught in a very strict environment, and sadly the environment that you gravitated towards was the conversion therapy, was the non-affirming theology. So while there is that personal responsibility, I agree with you, it is on the organization itself. And mm-hmm. it's about undoing what you did, or at the very least reconciling what you did, and reconciling with the community that was betrayed.
I mean, Michael, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Bussey, he was the original co-founder of Exodus International, and he talked about how, there's not really a way that you can give people their years of their life back. The only thing you can do is continuing to speak out against it in the present, and, to fight back against the ex-gay narrative. So.
Yeah. Also, one thing I really noticed, I feel like the people who have come out on the other side after conversion therapy, being in the leadership or being a part of it, and have affirmed their queer identities, they just look so much healthier. They don't look like they're hiding a secret. They don't look like they're being forced to say or do anything. Like, that was just kind of the impression I got, where it's like, damn, y'all are looking really good now. But it's also, I think the outside becomes that reflection of the inside. Like, when you're going through turmoil, it does reflect on the outside, whereas when you are more comfortable.
Question of, like, they look so much healthier now. I definitely thought that, like, John looks so much different than what he looked like when he was ex-gay. Like, I mean, it looks like, I'm sure that, like, I mean, he must... Okay, I want to say this in a way that just, like, isn't fatphobic, but it does seem like he has lost... I mean, or at least something about his, like, facial structure has definitely, like, changed. So I don't know if that just happens with age or...
Yeah, it's one of those things where... And this is coming from someone who has, like, depression and stuff, is... I feel like a lot of the time when you are hiding something like that, and when you're under so much mental anguish, you can't pay attention to your physical health. It's why a lot, and when you are under such an immense amount of depression, your habits change. Because, fun fact, your serotonin is located in your stomach. People say it's your brain chemicals, but it's in your stomach. So that's why a lot of times people equate food, like, to helping with depression. Either people have a huge appetite and they're filling their stomachs to kind of combat how their serotonin levels are, or it's the opposite happens where people are just too depressed to eat. It's very interesting. It's like really, it's stuff I didn't know till I started actually going on antidepressants, because the first thing they said was like, you're probably going to feel nauseous when you first start taking them because the serotonin's in your stomach and that's what it's going to be affecting. I was like, that's so interesting. But I completely agree. It's like, it's not even a matter of like a weight thing necessarily. It's so much like they just look healthier, whatever that means, whether that is weight-wise or physical appearance, or just there's just something about when a person's at peace, you can almost see it in their physical state.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't realize it, like, when you're with the person, but then when you see them, either they're at peace or they're not at peace, you can see the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of tell. It's just very... Because, like, I'll look back on, like, old pictures when I was really depressed, and I'll be like, who is that person even? Because it's not that I thought anything like that at the time. It was just... But you kind of look at it now, and it's like, oh, there was a lot of neglect there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do just want to clarify with what I said. I want to make clear that I'm not trying to be fat phobic. I was just pointing out there was a physical difference between...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting how that manifests in physical form, like when you're no longer having that inner turmoil, or at the very least you're working through it, how it does manifest in physical appearance.
Oh, sort of going back to some of the Freedom March, like this, when this lady at the Freedom March literally was yelling prayer works, I was just like, ugh. Like, because it's like, I thought it was interesting that, like, they were saying that they were doing things in a different way, but, like, the narrative is still the same, especially with the change movement, okay? Like, they really, like, pretty much every story on Change Movement's website, let me just literally click on a random one, and see if it mentions things about drugs or sexual abuse.
And it's also interesting because I think we mentioned this in the purity culture episode, is there's a lot of, like, the demonization of porn and masturbation. Because I'm
right. They say
they
talk about, like, porn and porn addiction, and masturbation is a bad thing.
And, like, that also causes being gay, which is very that, because I'm reading one of the founders' biographies, and he says, like, there's, like, the shame, there was so much shame in the addiction of masturbation and addiction to pornography. And it's like, I think that sex addiction and that sort of addiction is very real, but also it's part of me just wonders, it's like, you maybe think you're hypersexual because you've always been taught that sex is bad.
I'm also looking at, there's a page on the Change Movement website that, what does change believe about change? They think that change is exchanging the LGBTQ worldview and identity for a Christian worldview and identity as men and women who are children of God, embracing the transformation that comes through following Jesus' ways and walking with him, allowing the work of the Holy Spirit to bring healing to trauma that impacts our bodies, our emotional lives, and our perceived gender, celebrating the development of reordered sexual desires as it happens. Creating
Wait, what?
Huh? So they,
like,
yes.
What is it? Yeah.
Well, wait, no. So, right, what they're saying right there is that they do believe that change can possibly be, like change sexual desires. That's what they're saying here. They're saying it in, like, a sort of subtle way, but, like, right?
Yeah, I no, like, I completely understand what you just said. The what was more disbelief. It's honestly become a natural reaction at this point when I hear any of this sort of
and then the final thing that they think changes is creating family through authenticity that lives in community together based upon the values of Christ.
Yeah, well, also, what I love, too, is the change movement does not like the Equality Act very much. As a matter of fact, they're telling you just how to oppose it, which includes copy and paste this language, which is like I oppose the H.R. 5 because infringements on religious liberty, blah, blah, blah. Contact your senator. Also, step 3, pray for America. It's like...
while we're on the subject of the change movement, we're going to tell you about the amazing Unchanged movement, which is it's a ministry of Key Christian Fellowship, and they basically have, like, just as the ex-gay website has their testimonies, we got amazing testimonies on the Unchanged website, including some from like our friends and such. Yes. So
yeah, I love the level. It's like my favorite kind of petty in the sense that the Unchanged website looks almost identical.
I love it. I fucking love it because, like, I mean,
down
of course,
to
like,
the font.
What they're trying to do with, like, the change movement is that it looks so Instagrammable, right? Like, it looks good, like, quote unquote good. They're trying to be trendy and, like, with the, they're trying to be with the times, but still the same fucking message. And even, like, even
and, like,
down
that's
to,
kind of the case.
It's interesting that even, like, down to some of the language, the website follows it, except, like, it changes things to, like, be affirming. Going back to, like, how the documentary and how it's sort of representing things. I just think it's interesting that, like, they basically, like, show Jeffrey's face, and then they shortly after go to this, like, statistic that says a national survey found that LGBT youth who experienced conversion therapy were more than twice as likely to attempt suicide. Like, and he's still just really, like promoting this film on social media, and so I just, like, I want to know what's going on inside this man's head.
Yeah, it's honestly, like, it's really just heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. It's just really sad that he's in that space.
Yeah.
And it's almost harder because, like, when someone has that level of zeal for being, like the change movement or Freedom March, like, when people have that, the more zeal they have, the harder the fall is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, they even talked about that in leaving, like, survivor stories were suppressed, and I think really the documentary, what it shows is about the power of story, because what caused Julie to leave was when Exodus had a gathering of folks who were survivors, and the Alan Chambers, the founder, just listened to their stories, and Julie realized that she resonated more with the stories of survivors than anyone at Exodus.
Yeah.
And that's also, I mean, honestly, it touched Alan Chambers too, and that's why Exodus dissolved. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just hope that the people that find this documentary, again, they find it before they find conversion therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I mean, I really do not understand someone who is watching this documentary. I don't understand how you could watch through it and not think that, like, this is evil, because you see its effect on people, like, deeply in their stories. And so, like, that's, I mean, that's...
because you wouldn't use that for any other identity. You wouldn't go to a, like, I can change gender, I can change ethnicity, I can change, like, our queerness is such an innate part of who we are. And one thing that's, again, sorry to bring up Jeffrey again, is, like, I found my identity, like, I left my queer identity for an identity in Jesus Christ, and, like, I feel like that was replacing one thing with another thing in terms of finding identity. Yeah, you can have both, but it was that thing of, like, going from, like, replacing one identity, like, and all of everything that came with it with another identity. And it's like, okay, but who are you underneath all of this? Because you can have both. You can have multiple identities and not, like, have to suppress.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one last thing we were maybe thinking about talking about. I guess, what were your thoughts when the documentary was talking about Prop 8? Do you have any sort of thoughts to share?
Yeah, so, I think I've mentioned this before. I was in high school when Prop 8 was a thing in California. I was a freshman, so I was 14 years old. And it was the same year that Obama got elected president. So it was a very interesting time in the country. I went to a church that was very pro Prop 8, i.e., and again, just for reference for people that maybe don't live in California, is that Prop 8 was the recognition of marriage between one man and one woman. So if you voted yes on Prop 8, you basically said that marriage can only happen between a man and a woman, and gay marriage is not a thing. If you voted no, that would mean that gay people could still get married. And one thing, there is actually a documentary out there by Cassie J, who I've mentioned before in a previous episode because she did a documentary on purity balls and purity culture. She has another documentary called The Right to Love, An American Family, and it follows a family during the time that Prop 8 was being heavily debated. And one thing that was pointed out was the wording of the law was so confusing. Because you'd think that if you're voting yes on Prop 8, like, because they called it the gay marriage law. If you're voting yes on Prop 8, your brain would be like, yes on Prop 8, yes, gay marriage. No on Prop 8, no gay marriage. And, like, obviously, if you're someone that doesn't do your due diligence in terms of proposition research, which I realize is a pretty big privilege to be able to do thoroughly, that's way it was worded was confusing for a lot of people. Like, she even interviews the parents of one of the men in her documentary where they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna vote yes on Prop 8. And she's like, oh, so you're gonna vote to ban gay marriage? And she's like, no. They're like, no, we're gonna vote yes because it's gay marriage. And like they were confused by the wording of the law. And granted, I realize that I think that's just a crappy move to make. I also think that it's like that's like very intentional to word that law in such a way that's so confusing. Anyways, beyond that, so I was in high school when that law was a thing, and then it passed. I really didn't feel the impact of it because, one, I was in high school. I couldn't vote anyways. I didn't want it to pass. I was sad when it did.
And wait, I guess really... that was in 2008. So wait, is it true that from 2008 to when was that like annulled or whatever? Or I guess did that not happen until 2015? Like when it was
No, it was annulled.
Okay.
It was annulled long before 2015, at least a few years before, but I can look up exactly when it was annulled. Also, it barely passed, which is ridiculous.
But it is, I mean, I think it's like a power move of these evangelical churches that it managed to pass in California, like, right? Like,
yeah, and so it was ultimately ruled unconstitutional by federal court in 2010, although the court decision did not go into effect until June 26, 2013. So it was exactly 2 years before same-sex marriage was legalized. But yeah, it was just very interesting to be in an environment where it was very much celebrated that this law had passed, but even in the throes of my own evangelicalism, I was like, it's none of my business. Like, it was just like, I think gay marriage, like, I think being gay is a sin, but it's also none of my business, so I don't think that this should be a law. And also, keep in mind, I didn't know I was gay at this point. There was just something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way about it. And I'm so glad that it was annulled. I don't know why California thought this was going to be a good idea, especially...
Well, it seems like it's the churches that were mostly just, like, pushing for this, you know? From what
they absolutely.
Showed
it was...
And, like, Family Research
and it's
Council.
It's absolutely... And, again, it's weird, again, that it was in California, which, on the whole, seems to be a very liberal state. And, again, of course, you have kind of more in the central coast and stuff. It's a lot more conservative, but it's a very liberal state. And then the fact that this law passed is just absolutely bizarre to me.
Oh, I think part of it, is because, like, she showed how, I mean, Yvette's story showed how, like, these churches were rallying around it, and, like, she had never apparently seen anything like that before Prop 8. And, of course, now I feel like we see it all the time. We see these churches getting really, really political and rallying together on these conservative issues.
Yeah, and I'm looking even at the people that supported it, of obviously Republican politicians supported it. The National Organization for Marriage supported it. The Roman
National
Catholic
Organization for Marriage? Is that still running?
I can check. I'm actually on Wikipedia right now. So it was formed in 2007, and apparently they're still running. And they're also, like, against trans people using the bathroom that they want to use, which, you know, it's like, stay in your lane, National Organization for Marriage, but regardless. So the Catholic Church was in support of the bill. The Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic fraternal service order. It sounds like... I'm not going to say what I'm going to say.
Colonialist?
It does. It's the caucasity of that name. Anyways, obviously the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so the LDS/Mormon Church, very much supported it. And it's funny because most of my friends in high school were Mormon, and they were very conflicted by it. I don't know what their beliefs are nowadays as adults still in the Mormon Church, but at the time they were like, yeah, like, I think it's a sin, but it's not any of my business. Like, who cares? Which I would love to...
Maybe they're queer!
Maybe.
That's the reaction that you were having, so...
Yeah, part of me wonders. And then, of course, other religious organizations, those seem to be the main ones, is that the Catholic Church, the Knights of Columbus, and the LDS Church supported it, but also Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America, the Eastern Orthodox Church,
obviously too,
and
like,
of course the evangelical community focused on the family, American Family Association, and of course Rick Warren of Saddleback Church did support it.
Well, I guess that's probably all the thoughts that I was having about this. I definitely think overall it's a pretty good documentary. Definitely could have used maybe some more diverse voices, but you know, I particularly just loved seeing Julie Rodgers' story, and I cannot wait to get her memoir. So
Yeah, absolutely. And of course we will tag her and tag some of the other people in the documentary. Again, more of the like ones that are helpful in having
Yes.
affirming views. But we'll tag them. We'll link Julie Rodgers' book. We'll also link other resources as well, like the Unchanged movement.
Oh, I did want to quote this thing that I believe is Michael Busey. I'm sorry, however you pronounce it. As long as homophobia exists in this world, some version of Exodus will emerge. And so, as queer Christians, our fight is to like try to combat that homophobia, try to combat that narrative, so that people can know that they're loved by God, and so that hopefully this movement will become lesser and lesser as these folks who are queer will find communities that actually fully love them and support them and do not cause them mental or physical harm.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being vigilant and being vocal, because I think, again, people who are vocal, like there is the Unchanged movement and QCF, and again, there are issues with the Reformation Project, but
right.
Just organizations that are affirming of queer theology and queer people is shouting them out and being vocal about it. And I feel grateful to be a queer Christian who has the blessing to be vocal and to be able to host this podcast with you, because my hope is always that people will find this. People will find God is Gray. People will find Kevin Garcia before they find the other things.
So the head pastor of the church I grew up in was recently spewing some really transphobic things from the pulpit, and so just when I think about that, I think about like there are queer youth in your church, there are queer adults in your church, and so I just hope that maybe, like, I think about that every day. I'm like, how can I help them? It's like, maybe someone will find this podcast. It's like literally anyone who's listening, especially if you're a youth, if you're struggling right now in like a non-affirming environment, please like DM us, either the podcast account or us individually anytime. We would love to help you and give you resources.
Yeah, and even if we can't help necessarily, we can always pass along resources of people who could probably clinically help as well. One organization I will gladly shout out is the Christian Closet.
Yes.
They are a organization of queer affirming therapists in the faith community. So if you are a queer Christian or a queer person of faith, there is a whole collective of amazing therapists out there for you. I have a lot of friends that have utilized their services, and I wish that they had been around when I first came out, but I cannot recommend them enough.
So, okay, let's do, I guess let's do a little bit of a highlight of
I want to end this a little bit lighter than what we've been talking about, a lot of heavy stuff, but we'll end it on a little bit of a lighter note and end it on a bit of a celebration, I guess. So, April, what is your highlight of this week?
I guess on Tuesday, it was Tuesday, I met with the music director at my church, and she's really excited about me being on the worship team. Sorry to put like a small downer on like this highlight. Part of me is terrified that like things are gonna close down again, but as long as things aren't closed down, I'm like, well, I'm gonna be super duper involved in this church, and it's great. Hopefully,
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And also, I hope for everyone's sake that things don't shut down again, or at the very least things get a lot stricter in terms of like vaccination status.
Yeah. I mean, they're thinking maybe we'll have to go back to wearing masks, but hopefully like we will get to still physically be in church. And I'm like, okay, that'll hopefully
That's my church right now is we all have to be masked indoors. But it's the same, but we can have pre-COVID levels of capacity. We can still meet in person. So that's and again, that's just a California law right now. But yeah, hopefully. Also in California right now, one thing that they're talking about is having proof of vaccination to enter restaurants, clubs, theaters, or you have to have a negative test within 72 hours, which I think is great for me and all my friends who have been able to get vaccinated. I think it's a mad inconvenience for those who physically are unable to do so. But yeah, hopefully that maybe forces more people to get vaccinated.
Yeah,
that would
hopefully.
be really nice.
In France, they upped vaccinations by telling people that you couldn't enter a restaurant if you were not vaccinated. So
that's amazing. That's the hope too, is if like, especially in bigger cities and like places that have large entertainment centers, if they require vaccinations, more people will be vaccinated. Also, the FDA is very close to fully approving the Pfizer vaccine, so maybe that will up vaccinations as well.
I'm sorry, it wasn't approved? Oh, they had emergency.
It was emergency approved because pandemic reasons, but it's getting closer to being like officially approved by the FDA, so hopefully that will up vaccinations.
Cool. So what's your highlight for the week?
Yeah, my highlight for this week, it's actually one from a couple weeks ago, but I'll bring it up now, I guess. So my church is doing baptisms.
Right, what is that? I want to virtually attend this.
So my church wasn't really doing baptisms beforehand, but I guess during the pandemic, my pastor was getting a lot of emails of like, hey, I want to be baptized, I want to be baptized, I want to be baptized. So they're having a baptism Sunday at the beach on August 22nd. And for those of you that know me, or for those of you that have listened to past episodes, this has taken a lot of religious red tape to get to this point. So I am getting baptized on August 22nd.
I'm so excited for you. Oh,
Thank you.
I'm so great.
So excited. And it's really funny because even like people who aren't religious in my life are also excited because they know that for me, baptism means a lot of things to other people. I don't think it makes you a good or bad Christian to get baptized or not, but for me, it does have a lot of meaning, and the fact that I had to fight to get to this point even makes it so much more victorious. So yes, I'm getting baptized after
baptized.
Yes, at my super duper affirming church at the beach, because California, why not?
That's so nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll catch y'all in our next episode. It'll be an interview, as our second episode of the month always are. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah,
so,
thank you so
I
much
waved
for listening.
Sorry, I just fucking waved as if you didn't see that.
I know. So April waved. It was super duper polite and really sweet. She wants you all to have a great day.
See y'all.
Bye, friends.